So Age of Sigmar 4th edition is upon us, and we at Tabletop Time got sent a box of Skaventide, and we have big plans for it. The very first thing I wanted to do is go through the box contents and let you know what we think of it. Now, rest assured, we are actually painting up both forces inside this box, a spearhead of each, in this video. So we're not dragging it out, but we do want to check out the boxes, as I'm sure you all do, from the perspective of an actual user rather than Games Workshop's sort of promotional photos. Now I'm going to get one thing out of the way, and that is the steeply rising prices of Games Workshop products are something that we are all not a fan of, and we certainly aren't going to shy away from saying it. However, that said, this box game is not a huge amount more than Leviathan, and I think it contains actually a lot more content. And let's dive into that content. So the first thing that's really different about this box is you get these 2 hardcover books. So you actually have the core rulebooks for 4th edition, which is a full reset edition where everything is getting new rules. But you also have a hardcover book for Spearhead, which is their new skirmish game system akin to Combat Patrol for Warhammer 40k. And what I think is actually fantastic about this is these kind of books that have a fairly steep retail price independently are often barriers to entry for gaming groups to try out these new gaming systems. So making sure that these Spearhead books are circulating by putting them in the launch box is a really fantastic way to make people more likely to try out the game. This book contains pretty much everything for what we'll call Season 1 of Spearhead, including spearheads for every faction in Age of Sigmar. I'm actually hugely fond of this, and having played Spearhead before, Spearhead does feel to me as if it is everything Combat Patrol promised to be. So following that up with the fact that this box contains 2 Spearhead forces plus more means this is already off to a pretty solid start. As for the rest of the box, we have a whopping 74 Citadel miniatures. For the Stormcast Eternals, we have a Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker, a Lord Terminos, a Lord Veritant, a Knight Quester, some Reclusians, Prosecutors, and Liberators. And of all these models, I am most excited about the Prosecutors. My Twilight Sentinels force of Stormcast Eternals were heavily inspired by my love of Diablo growing up. So these golden armored angels are my absolute #1 in the army. The original Prosecutors for me almost got there. They looked really cool, but were a little bit clunky, and more importantly, they were a nightmare to play on the table because their wings made them impossible to navigate. So I'm really hopeful for this redesign. I love it. I'm really excited about them. And another really huge positive of this box is that Skaven fill out the other half of it, and Skaven are a huge fan favorite faction. The Skaven have been itching for new models for a long time, and this range does not disappoint. We have a Clawlord on Norbeast, a Greyseer, a Warlock Engineer, which I will say, I don't know why it's not a Warplock Engineer, and that kind of bugs me. We've got a Rattling Warp Blaster, Rat Ogres, Warplock Jezzails, and Clan Rats. We've got heaps of Clan Rats in this box, 40 to be precise. Now with all those minis, it doesn't stop there, because this contains all the cards, templates, and systems required for you to play Spearhead, as well as a double-sided board. And I have to say, this might be my favorite launch box Games Workshop have done. And the reason for that is purely the completeness of the play experience. If you're spending a bunch of money with a friend, splitting this box and diving into the hobby, the fact that you can actually play a robust game out of the box with everything you need, including playmat. There's also 4 bits of terrain in the box, all the cards, all the templates, all the books in hardcover, and all the rules. And your other friends who already have Spearheads or Vanguards can use them with the rules in this book. It just means it's a really play-friendly box, and that's something I'm really excited about. So that's what you're getting and what the box contents look like, but I'm biased. I love Stormcast Eternals. I have an army of them. So I'm painting up the Spearhead of Stormcast Eternals today, and the rest of the gang are painting the Spearhead of Skaven so that we can have a game here on the channel and let you know our full thoughts about Spearhead early next week in just a couple of days. This is a really big time for Age of Sigmar players, and we hope to bring you some great content covering the launch, both in this video and the next one. So that's enough talking about boxes. Let's start painting them and hopefully give you some ideas for what you can do in your hobby. They certainly look good in Games Workshop promo images, but what's the reality of building these models? How beginner friendly are they? Well, it's time to find out.
So I've been super excited for the newest edition of Age of Sigmar to come out, and Skaventide is pretty much everything I had hoped it would be. I have the lucky job of building up a bunch of rats for this box, and while I'm not necessarily on the side of destruction, I am excited to get my hands on these new models and have a look and see what they're like. So right off the bat, you can see these sprues are absolutely gorgeous. There is a ton of detail and little bits of storytelling that is spread all throughout the Skaventide box. I particularly love this Greyseer model model that's in this edition. I mentioned previously that I do think this is potentially a good sculpt for someone that's wanting to enter a painting competition or even Golden Demon. Something I should mention in this box, and is the same throughout all of the other Warhammer starting boxes for the new editions, is all of the models are push to fit. This means it doesn't require any glue to put these guys together. You can simply put part A, part B, mush them all together, and you'll have your model done. However, I don't particularly love this approach because I feel like sometimes it can be hard to put these models together, and I did find that in this case. So something I would do is trim down some of the pegs that connects these pieces together. This means when you do push them together, they'll be nice and snug, and make sure you don't have any seams in between your pieces. Other than that, everything was pretty easy to put together, and the instructions were very clear on which pieces went where. There is a whole lot in this edition, so I highly recommend taking your time and making sure you go through the instructions thoroughly so you don't mess anything up. For the Skaven side of this box and making up a spearhead force, I made up all of the clan rats. Yes, I made up all of them. I found out about halfway through that I didn't need to make up all of them for spearhead. I needed about half of them, but I've made up all of them anyway because I just kind of got into this weird madness of building all these rats and I got very excited. At the end of the day, doesn't really matter, just means it's all made up and we have more and more rats. Once everything was all pushed together, glued in and looking nice, it was time to give them their coat of Chaos Black and get a very special spray painted treatment.
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom.
So setting about building Stormcast Eternals from a starter box, this ain't my first rodeo. I started clipping out pieces to build some Liberators, the most basic models in the troop and the easiest to make some mistakes on, always the first models I start on. All the Stormcast models in this kit are made up of numerous bits, and many of them the head slots into the neck and then you seal the torso on around it. I've been in this hobby a very long time, and I have to say these starter models for the Stormcast were harder to construct than many non-push fit models that have been released lately. They look great, but the push fit's a nightmare. Also, the Stormcast have these daggers with handles coming up on them. Just another thing to be wary of. Be really careful where your fingers are if you're pushing these models. Those Stormcast daggers are a recipe for broken plastic. Now, for those who've been following the channel for a while, you might know my Twilight Sentinels. I mentioned that they're based off Diablo, and one of the concessions I make is all my winged models have hoods. With the recent advancements in Stormcast lore, prosecutors have been moved into the Ruination Chamber, where Stormcast Eternals are basically on their last legs, falling apart and falling to the storm, losing their humanity and becoming something else. Which actually works so well for my warband, where only the prosecutors and winged models have these hoods. So effectively they're hiding what they're becoming, and I think that's super neat. But that means I need some hoods, and thankfully Games Workshop have recently released some great hoods from this inner circle box of Dark Angels. So I cut out the hoods and carved out any areas around the neck or shoulders where I would need to make them fit in the Stormcast Eternals. Scale-wise, Space Marines and Stormcast work really well, so this wasn't a problem. And the only parts that look slightly out of place were the respirators and large faces, which I carve away anyway, because I don't want any semblance of physical characteristics to be distinguishable under the hoods. These will be painted matte black later. With all the faces filed down, I put a little dollop of plastic glue and make it look like a perfectly smooth, featureless surface. What? Alright, I've been building these models and honestly, I'm going mad because these rats in the studio keep messing with everything. They've ruined my instructions. I've only built 5 Liberators. I don't know, I can't build the other 5 Liberators. I've lost the instructions. Just messing with me, and I think I need to get some rat traps or mouse traps.
Yes, yes, in the house, yes, fine, cheese, yes, yes.
All right, now that those pesky rats are gone, I can now get back to building my Stormcast without interruption. I build up the characters as well as the Gryph-hound, and then I move on to the Lord Vigilant on Gryph Stalker. I have to say, this might be one of my least favorite models I've ever assembled from Games Workshop. Doing my absolute best, I tried to put this together, but there are multiple seam lines and connection points in really bizarre places. The cloak fits together in such a way that it's made up of 3, maybe even 4 pieces once the final model is assembled. And with each piece glued, any discrepancy in these placements basically creates a snowballing effect, making the rest of the model more and more difficult to glue together without horrendous seams. I did my best and I got a pretty good result, but the process and experience was really frustrating, and you gotta remember, I'm an advanced model painter. I didn't enjoy building this guy, but at least I enjoy the finished result, because this is one lovely looking Stormcast model.
Super gross outside, so I'm gonna have to spray indoors. So I'm gonna go ahead and spray up these rats in a red and a greeny color undertone. Murray Method it. I've built so many of these rats. It's a ratastrophe. How many rats are in this box? Let's spray some rats. Oh, all right, so while I'm hanging out by the bins and waiting for these guys to dry, I want to sort of talk about why we would use the Murray method in this circumstance. So the Murray method, or the spray can method, just is getting 2 different colors and laying them on top of each other. It's really good for just establishing a color for your army. So if you know what colors you want to use, then it's really effective. And once all of this spraying is done, we can actually go in and start layer painting them. Otherwise, I'm going to keep spraying these rats and we should be done very soon. Now, painting the Skaven side of the Skaventide box is a huge feat. I personally love to work on bigger models, and so in this box, the rat ogres were the place I decided to start. Here, I was able to lay down some of those foundation colors on top of the Murray method spray we had done before, figuring out what worked and what didn't, and just playing around with it in general. I previously painted up a Skaven in the Color Cube video using one of the cards as a palette tester, and I really liked the colors that I had used for him. So I'm going to use a similar color palette here for these new Skaven, going in with those warmer colors and keeping in with the general theme. I also decided for some bizarre reason to go with non-metallic metal for all of the Skaven. This was a pretty horrendous idea at the end of the day, because again, there are so many rats. So many rats, so they all had non-metallic metal. I don't know why. Wasn't a good idea. They all had metal on, a lot of metal on them. So I put myself into a very secluded box in deciding to paint non-metallic metal. But that being said, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I was able to also add in a little bit of brown for rust textures, which I thought looked really cool on these guys. So any of the messy mistakes, I just threw some rust on it and called it a day. And I was really happy with how they turned out. So as I was slowly going insane, painting up half of these Rat Clan models, eventually it did come to an end and I was able to call them finished. All that was left was some basing, which I decided to add in some muddy texture to the bottom and just some yellow colored tufts to make them look like they were scavenging around on a dusty, dirty planet. Once the clan rats were done, I was happy to move on to my next solo model, the Warlock Engineer. And I really feel like this guy should be called the Warplock Engineer because the warp stone kind of made sense, but it's fine, whatever. I'm probably gonna call him wrong, but the Warlock Engineer was the next model on my list. Again, knowing I had an established color palette, I could just go in with this guy and really lose myself in the process. I also want to mention, really oddly here, it's a bit of a tangent, that I think the black gloves on models make them look particularly evil. They remind me of like a mad scientist, so I gave this guy some sick black leather gloves. So I think that that's a nice little touch that I've added here. With these models pretty much done, I went back and added the ground texture and tufts to these, as well as trimming them all off with a nice black base.
Now, since Jen was painting the bulk of the rats, I got the honor of painting the nastiest, dirtiest, filthiest rat of them all, the leader on the bigger rat, I suppose. Now, this model is entirely new and is absolutely gorgeous in the most disgusting, hideous ways possible. And I'm gonna have a lot of fun painting it, and I want to really lean on just how gross this big rat is. So I'm going to start off by overbrushing the entire rat this off flesh tone, and then go in with grey contrast, covering the entire model, working in segments at a time. And while this grey is still wet, I'm going to mix in greens and strong pinks to get this tortured and rank feel to it. Then for the fur, I'll use an even darker grey mixed with dark green, just to complete the look. As you can see, I'm really focusing on putting the pink around all the joints. Any areas that might be swollen or move, or maybe are just sore and pussy. All the gross stuff, all the time. All the armor and metals I'm going to paint exactly the same way that Jen has done to make this rat fit in with the rest of the army. However, I'm going to be just a little bit more delicate and careful about the placement, just to sell the feeling of the general of the army and that he's just a bit more special than the rest of the rats. The final touches of this character are all the warpstone and underlight from the Undercity that are bursting through whatever he's broken through on. He appears to be riding half a house, so really it's a mount on a mount. A rat on a house. I'm not entirely sure what's happening here, but it's kind of cool. It's very Skaven. So for that, I'm going to get the most vibrant green possible and just slap it all over, allowing it to get messy, as this will allow for a little bit of object light sourcing for free. Then while that's still a little bit wet, I'm going to start overbrushing with darker green. Basically the reverse of highlighting with a lighter color, I'm going to do the complete opposite with darker colors to make it really look like it's glowing from within. Then for the final step, I'll mix in a little bit of vibrant yellow and poke that down into the deepest recesses where I really want the glow to be. And then after a few more extra details, it's finished and ready to join the rest of the ratties. And now let's check in with Dave.
Now, this wasn't my first rodeo. We've been doing this channel since Dominion launched, and that was the starter set for the last edition of Age of Sigmar. And back then I painted up my half, the Stormcast half, and I realized how long it took to paint this scheme. That's why I've only built the spearhead. It's the only sensible way to approach this, but even then I don't expect I'm going to finish all the models in time for this video's launch for embargo. It's been a while since I've shared the Twilight Sentinels paint scheme with you all, so I'll share it with everyone again.
So to paint my Stormcast, I need to use Chaos Black and then something secret. Retributor Armor Spray. This is all we have left of Retributor Armor. The bank actually denied me the loan. I would need to buy another one of these cans because they are the most ridiculously expensive product in the world. I don't recommend buying them. However, I did use them on my army, and I found that when you use the spray Retributor Armor and the hand-painted Retributor Armor, the finish is completely different. So I'm kind of stuck. It's like a loan shark. I'm kind of bound into this weird relationship with spray Retributor Armor. So wish me luck getting everything I can out of this can.
After Retributor Armor is laid down on the whole model, it all gets washed with Reikland Flesh Shade. And once this is dry, you dry brush on Auric Armor Gold. In this case, I substituted for Vallejo's Polished Gold. And then dry brush Liberator Gold and line highlight and point highlight with some Stormhost Silver. The process gets the gold looking really good, really quickly, and allows you to move on to other areas of the model. I've just finished painting the gold and I'm having big flashbacks to Dominion. I'm kind of getting some stretch on. It's taken me a long time. It feels like they're almost done because like 80% of the surface area is done, but I know from experience, I'm not almost done. I've got so much more to go. This is just the beginning. All right, Wraithbone.
I have, not yours. Ha
What?
Mine.
Damn rats! Next up, for all of the black straps, you just paint them with the nicest matte black you've got on hand, and then I highlight on the top edges with Skaven Blight Dinge and Storm Vermin Fur. The purple metallics are next, and I use Amethyst Alchemy from Scale 75. Give it a little soft glazy wash of Luxian purple contrast, and then re-highlight it with Amethyst Alchemy, and then a little point highlight on the edges of Stormhost Silver. The armor for my Twilight Sentinel is accented with a Diablo-esque white, and I paint this khaki and then work up to Wraithbone with a little dab of white at the very top to make them look very bright, yet still weathered and battle worn. I did note the Liberator hammers are kind of interestingly designed now, so I decided to keep the center of the hammers black and just have the striking edges in this amethyst colored metallic. Another important factor to my models is the basing, and my models are based in High-ish, but right on the border between Ulgu and High-ish, and this is where the Twilight realm I've come up with sort of stems from. So it's a real Fae inspired, strange greens and purples, weird glowing mushrooms. It's a little place of infinite half light. and strange magic creatures. So to do these bases, I spray them all Wraithbone and then use a bunch of contrast paints. The turquoise contrast paint, Pterodon turquoise for all of the rock and gravel, which I then wash in some various sections of Agrax Earthshade, and then Griff Charger Grey mixed with Space Wolves Grey for the rocks, and then it all gets dry brushed up with some bright highlights, some tufts get thrown on, some weathering pigments, and it all looks pretty nice. But today I didn't do any of that. I have to give a massive thank you to Jen, who had finished her Skaven with time to help me out with these bases as I was lagging behind. So she painted all of these up and did an absolutely amazing job, and is definitely often the unsung hero of basically getting a whole lot of work done and doing it really well and really quickly while I pull my hair out line highlighting things. So thank you, Jen, you did a great job. But while Jen has been helping me, there have been some rats in the studio that have been driving me absolutely crazy and making my time painting this so much harder. It's probably the reason Jen had to help out. I've been delayed, they've been messing with my paint, stealing my models, and I've had enough, but I think I know how to stop them. I know exactly what it is that a mouse wants. Hopefully that is the last of the disgusting rats around the studio dealt with, and I can take a look at my prosecutors. I love the new direction the wings have gone. I do love the light burst effect, but they're so painful to use on the battlefield that I'm really glad they've changed the design. But I have to say I'm not very fond of the way the studio chose to paint them. The fact that they've got a single layer of feathers and then blue fire coming out from underneath is kind of confusing. It's clear that these wings are mechanical in nature, as they are a backpack mounted onto the Stormcast Eternals. So the fact that we have these pristine white feathers and then only one layer of them makes it look really odd, not only from the point of view of them being a magical artifact, but also strange if you were to look at them as bird feathers, because bird feathers are layered. So when you look at this, it just kind of looks a bit weird if you separate them. So instead of that, I've decided to do a gradient across the whole thing and make it look like blue magic energy that is sort of fading out into fire and billowing away in the wind. So it has the most structure closest to the backpack, and then it loses it and turns into etheric fire as it spreads out. So to do this, I use some blue and I just do gradients, painting on more and more layers of brighter blue closer to the source all the way up to white, and then line highlighting those pinions and the flame with just some blues, just toning it in. Basically, it all just needs to look like a blended little thing where it goes from bright to dark. And I think it looks really good. I think this is a relatively quick way of doing it. I've done this army painter style. It's still not fast because there's a lot to line highlight, but I think the effect on tabletop actually has a lot more synergy and really pulls them together, and they look awesome. So I'm really happy with my prosecutors. And with all those models mostly painted, I'm going to admit there's a few bits that aren't finished. Let's check out the reveals. So as you check out these gorgeous new Age of Sigmar 4.0 models, I want you to also consider checking out our Patreon. That's right, thank you to all of our Patreon members for your support. We've been actually getting a lot of amazing interaction with you all. I've been redoing the way I do my Monday updates, and it's been so good. We've got a bunch of commentary, insight, feedback. It's fantastic to directly hear from you all about what we're doing, what we should be doing, what changes we're making, and it's just awesome. So if you'd like to join in on that community, get in on our private Discord or our mini review, or even just check out those behind the scenes videos and give your input on how we can make things better around here, consider checking out our Patreon. It is the reason we can do this as a job and don't have to eat meat goring every day, just some days. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Murray's here.
I am.
And we're going. We're saying bye. If you like this video, like and subscribe, all that stuff. On next week, we're going to be showing off Spearhead.
Yes, we are.
Murray and I are playing. It's going to be
playing.
really good. We've played once before.
I'm excited. I was half awake, but hey.
At a secret location at a previous time.
Yes.
Time for a rematch. Well, we never played each other.
No, we did
played
not.
secret people.
It's time to go off in the hard thing scheme.
It's Friday. It's beer o'clock. We're out of here. Bye.
We're done.